At the beginning of November, the Taipei International Travel Fair held its opening ceremony. More than 500 people from Chinese tourist associations enthusiastically traveled to Taipei to take part. These participants from China occupied 200 booths in the exhibition's first ever cross-strait travel exhibition area. This was the greatest number of booths ever occupied at the event. Very soon after the Taipei International Travel Fair concluded, the Taiwan Visitors Association sent a 200-person delegation to participate in the Travel Mart held in Shanghai. Then, at the very end of the year, the Ministry of Economic Affairs approved applications from Powerchip and Promos to build 8-inch 0.25-micron wafer fabs in China. TSMC also just gained the approval to use 8-inch 0.18-micron processing technology at its Shanghai factory. In addition, the application from ASE to build a low-end package and test facility in China was approved at the same time. But that's not all. Based on the principles of proactive management and effective liberalization, the central bank not only announced that it will allow all passengers to carry up to 20,000 renminbi when traveling to China, but also tried to make it legal to exchange NT dollars for renminbi within Taiwan's borders.
对于大陆的政策，无论是投资或者是怎么样子的互动往来，我们国家里面内部都有见仁见智的意见。台湾的主体性、政策的主动性、政府的主导性，这3点我们是坚持的。
Regarding the biggest event of the year for both sides of the straits, Chinese Lunar New Year charter flights, both sides have reached a consensus and have announced a comprehensive plan.
两岸春节包机从2月5号开始启动。
The flights will start on February 5th and last for 28 days. The volume of passengers will increase by 33% over last year. The level and depth of interaction between both sides of the Taiwan Straits has increased dramatically in recent years. But against the backdrop of gradual liberalization, government policy has had to strike a balance between the sometimes conflicting desires to speed up liberalization and to maintain national security. At the same time, opinions vary amongst the general populace as to what is the best course of action. In the future, the most important issue for Taiwan will be how to further nurture and develop cross-strait relations in the face of the conflicting cross-currents within our society.
Welcome to this week's edition of Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Chi-Chen Lo. We are now about only a month away from Lunar New Year. As we know, there will be direct charter flights between cities on the two sides of Taiwan Strait. So it seems to be a good start between the two sides of Taiwan Strait. So what do we expect to see in this coming year 2007? In today's program, we are very delighted and honored to invite the man who's in charge of Taiwan's cross-strait policy to come to our program to tell us Taiwan government's policy across the Taiwan Strait. Let's welcome Chairman of the Man Affairs Council, Dr. Joseph Wu. Dr. Wu, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So let's start with the direct charter flights between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. Could you give us the most updated information about these charter flights?
Sure. This Lunar New Year charter flight is going to start between February 5th to March 5th, and it's going to be between two cities in Taiwan, including Taipei and Kaohsiung, and 4 cities in China, including Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Xiamen. And the operation has been agreed upon between the two sides. In June, there was a simultaneous announcement both in Taipei and Beijing that the Lunar New Year charter flight is going to be instituted, and that was an agreement agreed upon in June, and including the other 3 major festivals, the Dragon Boat Festival, the Tomb Sweeping Festival, and the Mid-Autumn Festival. We will have 4 major festival charter flights flying in between cities in China and cities in Taiwan, and that will be institutionalized, and there's no need for further negotiations on these 4 major festival charter flights.
So how many people do you expect to see using these direct charter flights flying back from the mainland China to Taiwan?
I think for both flying back to Taiwan and for those who fly to China, we would expect about 10,000 people taking advantage of that route.
But as you say that this kind of negotiation has been going on for several rounds already, but as we know that there was no direct, official, dialogues between the two sides. Could you tell us the model for negotiation on these charter flights?
Sure. The Macau model is what's being referred to as a model for negotiation in between the two sides. The Chinese do not recognize the Taiwanese government, and they do not recognize the legitimacy of the Taiwan government. And at the same time, because the negotiation over the aviation issue involved government authority, so it's our insistence that there has to be government officials participating in the negotiations.
That's right.
So the flexibility is that we try to arrange a secondary group, that's the Taipei Airline Association, to serve as a contact point in between the two sides. And they try to make all the necessary arrangement in between the two sides. So when finally there's going to be negotiations, it's our officials who are in charge of aviation talking to the Chinese who are in charge of their aviation. So it's official to official negotiation.
So it's a direct official to official context between the two sides?
That's right. That's in substance, that is the reality. But the Chinese has been characterized as an unofficial negotiation because it's our Civil Aviation Association that is being serving as a contact point in between the two sides.
Do you expect to see this model to be applied to other talks on other issues as well?
That might be applicable to other issues, but I think in every practical issues that need to be negotiated in between the two sides, we need to find practical ways for the negotiations to start. For example, in the tourism negotiation, we artificially created a civil organization that the Chinese side would recognize as the organization that they would negotiate with. But in this organization, we had the tourism officials serving as a key staff in this private organization. So in essence, it's also official to official negotiation, but it serves the Chinese purpose that is a private organization negotiating with a private organization.
But do you think that the government in Taiwan will be sidelined in this negotiation process?
I do not think so. The reason is because it's our officials who are in charge of the specific practical areas who is being talking to the Chinese side. And it is the Mainland Affairs Council who is behind all this in arranging all the issues and timing for the negotiation.
What are the other issues that are being under negotiation right now?
There's no other negotiations at this moment, but there's plenty of contacts in between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. We have plenty of scholars who are free to travel in between Taiwan and China, and we also have a lot of businessmen operating in mainland China. The popular estimate is about 1 million Taiwanese businessmen living in China right now, and therefore many of them have contacts with the Chinese government, and sometimes they can pass the information back to Taiwan, and sometimes they can pass information to China. So by doing that, the two sides are actually being able to pass information back and forth. But these kinds of contacts are not official, and most of them are unauthorized. So the information carried back to Taiwan or carried to China may not authentic or authorized. So, we do need official to official contacts to get things done.
All right. Last year, 2006, you said that you were expecting to see the opening up of Taiwanese tourism market to the mainlanders by the end of last year. But as a matter of fact, we didn't see that happen. What are the reasons for these kind of difficulties in opening up Taiwanese tourism market to the mainlanders?
Well, tourism is something that we have already decided at the end of 2001. And beginning from 2002, we started to allow the Chinese tourists to visit Taiwan. But because the Chinese government hasn't allowed its tourists to visit Taiwan directly, so what we did beginning from 2002 is to allow those Chinese who are living abroad and those Chinese who are studying abroad to be able to visit Taiwan. And we also allow those Chinese who visit other countries to take a side trip to Taiwan. And up until now, there's already more than 180,000 Chinese tourists visited Taiwan already through those two paths. But for the Chinese to be able to visit Taiwan directly for tourism purposes, there has to be negotiations in between the two sides. And the Chinese demand that, and we want the negotiation to take place as well. But of course, when it comes to the negotiation, it's not our own desires that makes things done. It takes two sides to get things done. So we would require the Chinese to sit down to negotiate with us in a very serious manner to hammer out the agreement in between the two sides to allow the Chinese tourists to come to Taiwan directly. And people might be interested in the issues that need to be negotiated. I think for Taiwan's situation, what people are concerned about is whether the Chinese tourists are going to come to Taiwan only for tourism purposes, or many of them might come here seeking employment opportunities.
That's right.
So in order to verify the qualities or the qualifications of the Chinese tourists, it has to be negotiated to make sure that the Chinese government is sharing that kind of responsibility. So we want the Chinese to talk to us on that. And another issue that needs to be negotiated is the quality of tourism. For the time being, there's no negotiation or there was no agreement on the quality of the tourism issue at this moment. So many of those who come to Taiwan for tourism by going through other countries first do not enjoy the best quality of tourism in Taiwan. So we want that kind of situation to be addressed and to be corrected. So that has to be negotiated. Of course, there are other issues involved as well. For example, the exchange of currencies in between Taiwan and China has to be talked as well.
So these issues cannot be moved forward unless the two sides agree to sit down and talk to each other?
That's right. Unless the Chinese side is willing to negotiate with us in a very serious manner and try to hammer out all those issues and come to agreement with each other, there's no way that we can allow the Chinese to come to Taiwan directly.
Can they do that, unilaterally by allowing their people coming to Taiwan?
Yes, they can, but they still haven't do that. If you click on the website of the Chinese Tourist Association or the Chinese Tourist Bureau, they still haven't opened up Taiwan as a destination yet.
Is the tourism issue also linked with the direct flights between the two sides of Taiwan Strait?
Not until now. For the time being, the charter flights are only to be for the Taiwanese only. And if the Chinese are going to take advantage of the charter flights for tourism purposes or for other purposes, and I think there has to be more negotiations on charter flight. And I think the tourism issue has to be negotiated as well. There's some people who want to have the Chinese tourist charter flight. To us, that's okay, but that has to be done when the tourism negotiation and the charter flight negotiation are both completed. And by that time, we will naturally see the Chinese tourists taking advantage of the charter flight to come to Taiwan.
With the success experiences of direct charter flights between the two sides, do you expect to see the expansion of the charter flights to regular flights, including weekend flights and other, national days as well?
What is taking place in between the two sides right now are those charter flights limited to 4 major festivals and some cargo charter flight as well as emergency medical charter flights. In order for the charter flights to be expanded, we need to negotiate with China more. But I'm sure you remember what happened in the July special economic conference held by the executive yuan. There was a lot of debate over the issue of regularized charter flight. So anything that resembles a regular flight in between Taiwan and China, there's going to be a lot of controversies in Taiwan domestically. So what we try to do is to make the transportation linkages in between the two sides more convenient, but not to the extent that the charter flights back and forth is so regularized as it's already being direct flight in between the two sides.
But there seems to be some increasing pressures from other countries in pushing Taiwan to open up or the 3 links between the two sides, especially from the United States. AIT Director Steve Young said in public that it's very important for Taiwan and very urgent for Taiwan to have the direct flights between the two sides. How do you explain that kind of pressures from other countries?
Mr. Yang is not the only one, and I think Mr. Yang represents the interest of the American businesses operating in both Taiwan and China, and that kind of message is being heard repeatedly. Other than Mr. Yang representing the American government, we also hear from the American chambers of commerce and European chambers of commerce, and their voices have been quite loud, and we heard them. But as I explained a little bit earlier, anything that needs to be worked out after the negotiation, it takes the two sides to work out the differences, and it takes the two sides to hammer out the agreement. But if the Chinese government is not willing to negotiate with us, there's no way for us to realize the direct flight in between the two sides. And up until now, the Chinese government is still insisting that the flight route in between Taiwan and China is the domestic route. And they're also saying that we have to accept the 1992 consensus or One China principle before they want to negotiate with us. So under these kinds of circumstances, circumstances, there's no way for the direct flight to be realized. But we understand the circumstances, so we'll try to use the charter flight as the intermediary before the direct flight is realized.
Can this so-called Macau model be applied to negotiation on these charter flight or direct flight issues?
I think it's going to be a bit more difficult for the direct flight negotiation, because for the direct flight negotiation, the two sides need to work out an aviation agreement. And for the aviation agreement to be negotiated, and I think the people in Taiwan wants to see the government in full charge of the issue, and that the aviation agreement also needs to be signed in between the two sides. So it takes more courageous for the Chinese government to face the reality that it requires government officials to take part in this kind of negotiations directly. But of course, the Taiwan government is quite flexible on the practical issues. And if the Chinese is willing to negotiate with Taiwan on the direct flight issue, I'm sure there can be agreement in between the two sides on how the negotiation can take place.
But do you see the possibility of they changing their position on existing semi-official or non-governmental context between the two sides?
They might, and they've been changing their positions. But I don't know whether they are going to go back to the harder positions that existed between, before any negotiations took place in last January. What we saw in the Chinese agreement to negotiate with us on the Lunar New Year flight was that we have talked to them, we urged them for 3 months before they were willing to negotiate with us, before they dropped all those political barriers in coming to the negotiations with us. The first time I proposed to the Chinese side for negotiations was on October 4th, 2004. And it wasn't until January 3rd, 2005, when they agreed to negotiate with us. So it takes time and takes patience for the Chinese to change their positions. And of course, if the Chinese government is willing to negotiate with us on those practical issues, including the direct flight, we are willing to give them a little bit more time before they change their mind.
There are also some other controversial issues generating a lot of debates in Taiwan. And the agricultural cooperation between the two sides is a very good case in point. When we come back, we also talk about agricultural exchanges between the two sides of Taiwan Strait. Let's take a break.